Hello, kia ora, g'day. I'm Philip Duncan from WeatherWatch TV with your February ClimateWatch update. Let's get into the forecast as we cover New Zealand, Australia and the South Pacific over the month ahead. And we kick off February 1st with a lot of high pressure from the southeastern corner of Australia right across the Tasman Sea and right out east of New Zealand. Now this high pressure belt that's over us at the moment, and the next lot that's coming in from the southern part of the Indian Ocean that will track south of Australia as well. These high pressure systems are keeping the tropical lows away from us and the Southern Ocean storms away from us as well. So we're going into a more settled period of weather that looks drier than average. But I gotta say, these low pressure zones in the tropics in particular, which are forming all the way from Madagascar across to about where you see here, just north of Fiji, getting into the Samoa area, that is a large area of low pressure, and at any time, in the right moment when the high pressure is not quite over us, one of those lows could drop south and bring a lot of rain. So from a weather forecasting point of view, this is a bit of a tough month coming up for some of us because it looks mostly settled, but then you've got all these things kind of being fired at us from the tropics and from the Southern Ocean, and it only takes a little gap in the high pressure for one of those lows and rainmakers to come on through. So that is a bit of a wild card going into this month. Bureau of Meteorology says that ENSO remains neutral. That means there's no La Niña, no El Nino. However, it's been neutral for 6 months despite sea changes that are consistent with La Niña, and since late December, conditions across the tropical Pacific have been more La Niña-like. However, until it's sustained in the atmosphere and the ocean, the Bureau of Meteorology will say that it stays in neutral for now. All surveyed global models also remain neutral until at least June. So we're kind of flirting with La Niña, but not necessarily seeing it officially happen. And over in the Indian Ocean and the Southern Ocean, conditions also remain neutral. Let's have a look at the highs and the lows as we go into the month. And we kick off with week 1, February 1st. And you can see, as we talked about, all the low pressure up here in the tropics. That's normal for February to be seeing that, so not too alarming. And in fact, across Australia, the monsoon running, the latest it's ever been on record. We are seeing it sort of move in now, but it's spluttering at best. It is not necessarily drenching the top of Australia, although certainly parts of northeastern Queensland are getting it. But we've got this protective layer, if you like, of high pressure in the middle here. Low pressure in the tropics, low pressure south of us over the Southern Ocean, but this protective layer is keeping the southeastern corner of Australia extremely dry, drought being talked about over there now. And in the New Zealand area, we are also seeing significant drying out weather. So that's how the first week is kicking off. By the time we get into the second week of February, we're still seeing this high pressure belt tracking along the south of Australia, but perhaps breaking up a little bit. And it's on the back end of a high pressure zone. Once it's moved through, that's when you've got the greatest chance of getting that rain, especially when it's coming out of the north. So tropical lows up here will look for a chance to drop southwards at these sorts of moments. So that could bring rain into the eastern side of Australia, but for New Zealand, we still remain mostly dry, but worth noting this is low pressure up here and easterlies coming down across the country thanks to that very southern placement of high pressure. And we get to the third week, our final map, and the reason why we don't show 4 weeks is because there's not really any modelling that's accurate that far out. But you look to the left-hand side of the screen, by the time it moves through to the end of week 3, it'll be somewhere around the New Zealand area. So what you're seeing is high pressure remaining where the month starts off. Middle of the month looks the same as the start of the month. High pressure south of Australia, southern Indian Ocean, and then tracking over the top of New Zealand. But here's exactly what I'm talking about. Low pressure dropping southwards, trying to come down to New Zealand, and low pressure in the Southern Ocean trying to come up. We've got this narrow area of high pressure kind of elbowing it away from us. So if these high pressure zones kind of break apart, lows drop southwards or come up northwards, and that's what we'll be keeping a close eye on. As for Australia, rain could be really pushing into the eastern side and over to the western side as you start to see that monsoon settle itself in a bit better. All right, changes to the monthly outlooks. This is important. The Bureau of Meteorology in December stopped doing what they've always been doing. They're no longer providing ENSO updates. That's talking about La Niña, El Nino, and they're no longer going to provide the ENSO dial. You know, that sort of blue-red dial that shows La Niña watch or, you know, going into El Nino watch and all that kind of stuff. That's no longer there. And that's because they're saying that there's too much focus on that particular area. Too much chatter, certainly in the news media over the last year in New Zealand. My goodness, how many stories have there been about La Niña, and we still don't even have it yet. So they're now calling it the Southern Hemisphere Outlooks. This covers what's going on in the tropics with La Niña and El Nino, what's going on in the Southern Ocean, and what's going on in the Indian Ocean. And that's all kind of what combines to create our weather. Very different to NIWA in New Zealand. They have no free open data for us to use, very limited maps. And it is very much worth pointing out, NIWA has used their lawyers against WeatherWatch for using the soil moisture maps, which is where we kick off today, because this public map made by the taxpayers and the government is very important for New Zealand to work out where we're currently at. That's the only value in it, really. It's showing you that the eastern areas are wetter than they should be at the moment. No surprise for most of you. Some in the east could still do with a little more rain, and this map doesn't capture the big downpours that tracked through last night, the 30th of January, just before I recorded this. So there will be some more relief in this area as well. But look, the areas that are dry are likely to get drier as we go through the weeks ahead. And when you look at the map here this is again from the Bureau of Meteorology, this is measuring what's happening in the tropical Pacific, showing all the different computer models from around the world. And are we going to go into La Niña or not, which we've been talking about for nearly a year. It is brushing with it. It's really flirting with it at the moment. That's why you're seeing all those lows up there at the moment. But look, this is still remaining the same as what we saw at the end of last year. The general trend is that it's still average in that neutral area, but there is some computer modeling getting into that official La Niña category over the next month or two. So if it does happen, it is likely to happen then. But if you've been watching me for the last year, you've probably noticed the goalposts keep shifting. Every update, it might be next month now. So that's why I think the Bureau of Meteorology are kind of exhausted with this constant chatter about it when it's not, it makes up one part of all the different areas that affect us. So this is the Nino area that we we're just talking about before, where you measure La Niña and El Nino. Temperatures there in the equator are a little bit below normal, warmer than normal though further out here around Papua New Guinea. Also, look at the warmer than average weather south of Tahiti and in the Southern Ocean area and around Australia, seeing much higher than usual temperatures. But if you zoom into New Zealand, this is from the Moana project, you can see that most of the country does not have a marine heat wave. There is a moderate one in some areas in the yellow boxes. That's showing that temperatures are maybe a degree and a half above where they should be. And I think over the next week or so, with that high pressure sitting over us a lot more, hotter weather, not as much wind, we may start to see a little more of the marine heat waves creeping in around us. But to be honest with you, that is a very good map to see. That is a healthy map. This one isn't quite so healthy. Departure from normal for the next 7 days ahead. And I see red, I see red, I see red. I said that in my other video. It is basically a lot of red, and that means drier than average. If you're in the white shaded areas, then you've got normal rainfall for this time of the year. But the blue, the wetter than usual stuff, that is almost entirely offshore, except for around sort of parts of Vanuatu, New Caledonia, some parts of Queensland, and also around the Kimberley region. Otherwise, most places are leaning drier than they should be for the next week ahead. So what does that mean? Well, let's have a look at the rainfall. This is the animation for the next 15 days. The areas that you really want to look at are these big blobs of purple and blue. That's where the really heavy rain is on the scale here. Doesn't actually include, the 200, 300, which is in the brightest blue here. So you're seeing some very heavy rain now up in the tropical areas. That's the monsoon for Australia, the 200 millimetres here in the dark blue with the purple surrounding it. But the pale blue just southwards here, much drier than usual, and it's a similar story around the top of the North Island. This is a different map showing the same thing basically. This shows the proper key. So 300 millimetres up here in this blue, the dark blue. But the pale blue, bottom of the scale in these white boxes. So this is where we're not expecting to see a lot of rain. But look, in both cases, where there's very little rain falling, just north of it, there is a lot of rain falling. So this is what I mean by that wild card factor. All it takes is one low, a gap between the high pressure zones to drop southwards, and suddenly rain comes on in. But certainly for now, most of that wet weather is offshore, but it does brush, as I said before, New South Wales, parts of Queensland, Northern Territory, and up there around the Kimberley. Here is a map from the Bureau of Meteorology. I don't believe Niña makes a map like this in New Zealand. This shows the next month rainfall that they're expecting across Australia, and you can see again it's this northeastern area and also the northwestern corner, basically at the top end there, getting the heaviest of the rain. And unfortunately for these areas which are getting very close to official droughts, we are seeing drier weather carrying on. So before I go, I just want to show you this last animation. This is the 15-day animation, and basically it just gives you a bit of an idea as to what is going on. Re-watch it a couple of times to make more sense of it. The timestamp is just here. But what you see is a lot of energy up in the tropics, a lot of low pressure forming, dropping down near New Zealand, and also the Southern Ocean coming up and brushing the South Island. And we've been seeing that pattern off and on all summer. So there's no real change. But look, as we go into the middle of the month, this is what I'm talking about. As high pressure moves away and before the next one gets in, and this is a pretty weak one by the looks of it, you've got a chance of these tropical lows dropping southwards, dragging that red line down, all that tropical heat. So a lot of Australia really feeling the heat going into this month. New Zealand off and on with warm and cooler airflows because of where we're located and the storms down to the south. But certainly it's, there are two things happening here. One, there's a lot of high pressure coming through New Zealand, exiting the southeastern corner of Australia. And two, there is a lot of energy in the tropics and the Southern Ocean. And either of those low pressure zones could drop down our way or move up our way and bring in some rain. So we'll be keeping a very close eye as to what goes on later this month. We will update you again as we go through February and we see any changes to what we're saying here. We will certainly let you know. But that is all from me for this month. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be back again 1 month from now with our next Climate Watch update.